Hi Keith, I'd like to thank you for joining me today to talk about housing. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that make up the Cowper electorate, the Gumbaynggirr, Dunghutti and Biripi peoples, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. So let's get straight into it and talk about the cost of housing. It's no secret that housing prices and rents have been skyrocketing across Cowper and much of regional Australia. I'm interested to hear your view of the local housing situation or stories you've heard and the impact or the potential impact that a lack of affordable housing is having on our community and our workforce.
As you know, this is a very critical issue. It's having a massive impact on our communities. Young people are seeing the great Australian dream die. They're losing hope in ever owning a home in the future. Right now, we have older people, essential workers who are sent to our area for work who can't find homes to rent, let alone buy. There's a lot of despair. There's a lot of homelessness because of this. So I think this is a crucial issue and it has to be addressed.
Yeah. And I guess following on from that is, looking at the issues you're seeing around, what is it that what's the role of government in all of this? And you specifically, if elected, what will you do in the housing space? Are there local priorities or broader federal initiatives you want to mention? And obviously, what's the difference between aspiration and actually achievable?
Well, quite a few aspects to your question there. I think, first of all, the federal one, from Labor's point of view, we want to implement our policy of Housing Australia Future Fund, where we provide affordable and social homes for the people who purchased under that scheme. They'll be putting money back in so we can continue to build in the future. How will that impact us locally? Once Labor is in government and they have a local member, that local member's job will be to ensure that some of those houses are built in this area so we can provide immediate relief there. Government, of course, provides rent assistance and social housing that does exist, although the wait list is quite long. There's tax breaks. There's a number of levers that government can pull. So I think the role of government is crucial, vital, and has to be a part of this. I think we have to shift the public narrative about housing too from being an economic investment to actually being a home. And that will take quite a bit of work, but I think it has to happen.
Yeah. So let's move on to another big issue, which is housing and climate change. We're no strangers to intense weather events in Cowper. Just in the last few years, we've had droughts, bushfires, floods and storms. Thankfully, we didn't receive the level of devastation that Lismore recently did with their two successive floods. But there are some big questions being raised and the role of government in dealing with these issues. So how do we deal with housing and climate change? And how do we ensure that it isn't the groups who are already vulnerable that are facing the biggest impacts and risks?
That's a very important question. The first one is that we have to ensure that our homes in the future are built so that we have, for example, solar panels on the roof that can be effectively fed into the grid. We have to bring back water capture from roofs. We can look at design and building standards, the materials that we use, the locations that we allow locally for housing to be built to ensure that they're not in fire areas in danger of fire or flooding. I think we have to tie the building and construction of housing to the whole issue of climate. The whole issue of climate has to be seriously addressed. It has to be picked up by government that wants to act on it immediately, that has a plan to go to ensure that that ties in with the future growth of our urban and housing centres. So this is an area that, again, has to come under the spotlight and has to be innovative policies in place on both those fronts, building the houses and also making sure that we can move on climate action.
Yeah, and finally, let's talk about some housing solutions. You may know from our work, the Housing Matters Action Group is really focused on unlocking innovative local solutions while also advocating for broader system changes. Is there anything that you see as a key project or a concept or a policy that would make a difference in the housing space that you'd like to mention as we're finishing up today?
Well, I'd certainly like to mention Labor's policy of Housing Australia Future Fund, which I mentioned before, that will build social housing and affordable homes, and just as crucially, 10,000 homes for essential workers. And these have to be affordable and achievable for people to access and to move into. There's other innovative projects too that many other countries, Nordic countries, I think New Zealand has some great models. There's quite a lot of room for governments to think outside the square, aside from the traditional ones that we've already got at the moment. Not all homes can be required through the market, through mortgages. There's a lot of community initiatives in this area. Sometimes in some areas people are working on radical solutions themselves. I think governments have to investigate, listen to those people and work with them and to back them because they can't be left on their own. So I think there's a lot of room for government to be flexible, to be innovative, and to look at what works, what's affordable, and what can meet this need.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Keith, for your time today and your willingness to talk housing with us. I'm sure we could talk longer about any of the topics that we've covered. I know it's a really busy 6 weeks, and all the best with the campaign.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, Emma.